Les Paul was a great guitarist. He was born in 1915 and performed as Rhubarb Red in the Fruit Jar Drinkers, in addition to many other bands. He was also an inventor, innovator, and tinkerer on guitars. He worked at the Epiphone factory, where he learned the ins and outs of guitar building and luthiery. In 1938, he attached an Epiphone neck onto a board, or a 4x4 plank, going from the neck heel to the end pin, and made what was one of the first solid-body guitars. Because of Hawaiian lap steel guitars, guitarists knew the advantages of solid bodies, that they had more sustain than an acoustic guitar, and were much less prone to feedback. It was successful, and Les Paul was happy with it. But when he went to play the next gig, nobody paid attention to him. So he went back home and attached wings on it so it would look like an ordinary guitar that people recognized. And all of a sudden, people could tell this guy was playing a guitar. He called it the Log. Around 1946, Les Paul took his Log to Gibson, which was a giant company for guitars, in Chicago. Maurice Berlin, who was president of Chicago Musical Instruments, the company that owned Gibson, laughed him out of the office, along with the rest of the Gibson staff. Let's go back in time for a moment. In 1941, O.W. Appleton, App to his friends, worked at a furniture store. In 1941, he got the idea to make a solid-body guitar, and he went ahead and built it out of pine. He knew some people at Gibson, and he bought an unfinished neck from them to use on his new guitar. He called the guitar the App. In 1943, he took his guitar to Gibson to see if they were interested in manufacturing it. They told him they couldn't imagine somebody playing a solid-body guitar. He tried to patent the instrument, but in his small town of Burlington, Iowa, he didn't have access to a patent attorney. And because of World War II, manufacturers used their factories to advance the war effort, and almost all guitar production ceased. Appleton quit pursuing the patent. Almost 10 years later, in 1952, Appleton received a letter from a friend at Gibson. The letter read, "Well, App, you see our competition has finally forced us to come out with your solid-body guitar. Sure wish we had listened to you back in 1943. Included with the letter was a brochure for the new Gibson Les Paul model. So who designed the Gibson Les Paul? We just saw that the basics came from O.W. Appleton, and I'm going to read out of the book 50 Years of the Gibson Les Paul by Tony Bacon. Ted McCarty was the president of Gibson, and McCarty's recollection was that Gibson started work on its own solid-body guitar project soon after the appearance of Fender's Broadcaster in November 1950, and that he and the company's top engineers were involved in the project. We designed the guitars, McCarty said emphatically, and we started to learn something about a solid-body guitar. I was working with the rest of the engineers, and we would sit down, like in a think tank, and we would talk about this guitar. Let's do this, let's try that. We eventually came up with a guitar that was attractive, said McCarty, and as far as we were concerned, it had the tone, it had the resonance, and it also had the sustain. But not too much. As far as I can remember, to get to that point took us about a year. Les Paul's recollections of the events that led to Gibson producing the Les Paul are different. He said that Gibson first contacted him early in 1951, when Fender started making early examples of its solid-body electric. He remembered that Maurice Berlin, boss of Gibson's parent company, CMI, told his second-in-command, Mark Carlucci, to get in touch with the fellow with the strange log guitar, whom they'd seen briefly back in the 1940s. They said, "Find that guy with the broomstick with the pickups on it." Paul laughed. They came around right away as soon as they heard what Fender was doing. And I said, "Well, you guys are a little bit behind the times, but okay, let's go." Paul said that he had a much bigger involvement in the design of the Les Paul guitar than McCarty's story of the development allows. Paul states categorically, "I designed everything on there except the arched top. That was contributed by Maurice Berlin. Mr. Berlin told me he liked violins and took me by his vault to show me his collection. And he said that Gibson had something that nobody else had, a shaper that could make a belly on that guitar, and it would be very expensive for Fender or whoever to make one like it. He asked if I had any objection to a violin type, and I said no, that was a wonderful idea. So then they introduced me to Ted McCarty, and we signed the agreement with Gibson. But McCarty was adamant. I have told you exactly how it got to be a Les Paul. We spent a year designing that guitar, and Les never saw it until I took it to Pennsylvania." So what do I think? Well, Ted McCarty was a businessman. He was president of Maytag and Wurlitzer before he became president of Gibson. And businessmen don't have the greatest reputation for being honest and truthful and not trying to just sell you something. Les Paul was a musician and an inventor, and he was willing to give people credit for giving him ideas about designs and whatnot. It looks to me like O.W. Appleton came up with the original idea, then showed it to Gibson, and I'm sure the personnel at Gibson did a bunch of the detail work. But I believe Les Paul when he says that he pretty much laid everything out, how he wanted it. The official single cutaway Les Paul shape was discontinued in 1960 because Gibson had developed a new type of guitar, which later became the SG, but they called it Les Paul while they still had him under contract. He didn't particularly like the thing, and in 1962 his contract with Gibson ran out. He did not want it renewed because he was getting a divorce from Mary Ford at the time, and he didn't want Mary Ford's lawyers coming after his new contract money that he was likely to get. So that's why Les Pauls weren't manufactured again until 1968. Since then, there have been a lot of different Les Paul models and styles and types and copies and all sorts of stuff. But they're still all trying to imitate archtop acoustic guitars, which to me is just silly. There's a lot more to this story, but this is not really a history of the Les Paul. So let's get to the rest of it. What's wrong with Les Pauls? Okay, in the first place, they're too heavy. There's no reason for them to be this thick and heavy. They have a cap made of maple, which weighs more than mahogany, I do believe. But there's, again, no reason for them to be this heavy. Like Les Paul himself, I prefer a Les Paul with a flat top, not a fake arched top, as I don't think this really helps anything. And I like the sound of mahogany. Another problem is this corner that sticks out in the heel of the guitar. What the heck is this? It's not as bad on my personal Les Paul. And I need to add that the only reason I really have a Les Paul, or a Stratocaster, or a Flying V, is so that I can not be accused of sour grapes. You know, I don't like those guitars because I don't have one. Well, yeah, I do have one, and I don't like them. And this single cutaway is just ridiculous. Some people might think that this makes the guitar stronger or have better tone, but I personally don't buy that. And the whole reason for this cutaway is because the guitar is made to look like an acoustic guitar or an archtop jazz guitar, which an archtop jazz guitar has a reason to be round. It's the best, easiest way to bend the wood on the sides. But on a solid body guitar, it makes no sense. And the only reason for this is gutlessness. Guitarists that are afraid the fans will laugh at them because they're not playing something that looks like a guitar. Which is what Les Paul found out with his log guitar, way back when. So because this archtop guitar shape has been shrunken down so much to make it solid, it doesn't hold the neck up properly in my lap. Other people might be okay and work around this, but I don't like it. There needs to be more support to hold the neck up in the proper position. And another problem with these what I would call roundy guitars, is that this is not the best shape to get your arm around. There are way better ones, and I personally like the way my forearm fits on an Explorer or a Firebird or any one of these type of guitars, or my own Disruptor, for that matter. By putting that portion of the guitar in the right place, my forearm can prop the neck up when I've got it strapped on, by relaxing it on there. And I would be quick to add that they put the strap button on the curve of the upper bout, where the strap is really likely to fall off at any moment. But I can't get over the fact that all of these guitarists care so much about what the audience is going to think of how they look, that they would have a less efficient guitar shape. And my daughter thinks they look just like a normal guitar. And I rest my case.